Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I also want to lend my support and thanks to the athletes of Bermuda that are going and working hard to get themselves ready for international competitions. I thank the opposition senators for indicating their support for this, but I will get into some of the details of the questions that were asked by Senator Robinson, and the first of which is he asked how many drafts were done. I would go with the word several, but I don't think that does justice as to how many times we went back and forth. And speaking along the lines of what Senator Simmons just said, in thanking the technical officers, there was times that I walked out of my office in the ministry, and many lawyers from our chambers were there going over this. And I will be honest with you, it became a quite daunting and frustrating task to go back and forth because remember, we would submit this to our water, just so everybody can understand the process. We have a regional water team that we kind of discuss. And just to put it bluntly, and I'm very hesitant as to how I lay this out, but I'm sure you can work your way around what I'm saying here, is that when you are dealing with an organization as large as water, it has so much power and control over this area for good reason. You deal with the officers in your region who you're comfortable with, you have a relationship with, you would have known I would have met them for the first time in January at a water conference. But then their recommendations that they have been going back and forth with us have to then be passed to a different committee. And the unfortunate part is that committee does not have a relationship with us, and they do not see the amount of work and that Basara has been doing in order to come into compliance. And it was a shock even to the water regional directors when the recommendations came over from a meeting held in Shanghai after we had been told that, it looks like our new legislation was going to be on par with what they asked for. So it was at that point that we had to go back, and this may speak to how many drafts. We literally had to go back and rip up the entire act and kind of redo it. And that's why what you have in front of you is a new act. It's not just amendments here and there. It's a whole new process because it was so much that we had to do. And I would say this, we are not alone in this. Maybe they got to us first, I'm not sure, but I have had many calls from counterparts in the Caribbean to ask, to share how they feel about the request coming from water. And so I'm really happy that we were able to do it. I cannot give you a clear amount of how many drafts went back and forth. A lot of times, if you were to consider a draft would be a word has to be changed here. A line has to be taken out here. This person's name has to be switched with a different individual. It was a lot of moving parts on this. And it was a monthly and then became daily and even hourly back and forth with multiple ministries, the Ministry of then Youth, Culture and Sports and the Attorney General's chambers. I'm not sure about this watch list and the disconnect to us getting to the end goal. The end goal is that, our athletes were able to compete in the Pan Am Games and the Parapan Games and going forth in what is an Olympic year coming up. We're happy that we were able to get this all sorted in the name of the athletes so there can be no clouds of remote suspicion around clean sport in Bermuda. Senator Bell, I must admit that your points are well noted, and I will ask that Basara, once this is passed, sit with the compliance and privacy officials and officers to take under advisement the confidentiality, the whistleblower protection, and the recommendations that have been put on the floor today by Senator Bell, and we will, meet in due course with the Information Commissioner's office to see if maybe once this is passed, further amendments down the road should be made to bring us into full compliance with privacy, while still adhering to what water is looking for. And that's where the delicate balance, I will be honest, came with this. It's because even under a policy that we've talked about before, which is illicit drugs, Basada in this 2011 Act had a whole illicit drug policy that was spoken about. WADA said that they will not sign off on any act that required an illicit drug policy. So what we've had to do is take that out completely and kind of make it a side document that Basada has, but it's not actually in the act. So we'll speak about that another day. But there's nuances like that that were very tricky for us to navigate around as far as what the government felt was sufficient oversight on certain areas, and WADA would not sign off on it. So in the interest of getting us to get our athletes to compete on the world stage, we had to make some tough decisions as to how we were going to still adhere to some policies that are required by the everyday Bermudians, while still putting or removing stuff in the act to make water compliance. And Basada will meet with the commissioner to determine whether additional amendments to the act need to be made. Madam President, with that, I'm not sure if there's anything further.
Just a moment. Yes, there's a question from Senator Tucker, opposition leader. Senator Tucker, you can put your question.
Thank you, Madam President. I actually have 3 questions. I thank the minister for his response. For me, as my Senate colleague has already mentioned, obviously we support the legislation.
Mm-hmm.
For me, a concern that I have is when what appears to be administrative hoops that has led us to actually getting on a watch list. And so, and of course, that watch list in my mind is representative of not only how Bermuda appears to the world, but also Bermuda's athletes potentially appear to the world, right? I mean, we've just come off the back of Flora Duffy, Connor White, making marks in the sporting world. We have someone sitting in this room at this very moment who has made Mrs. Hunter, who has made her mark in international sports. And so being on the watch list is a significant personal concern of mine. And so I would like to sort of just understand a little bit more deeply, I guess, how we actually got there. So that's where my questions are coming from. So the first question I have is, if the minister can tell us what date did Bermuda actually request the extension to the 3 months that was given by WADA? The second question is, what date was given for the extension? So what was that deadline date? And then the third question is, when did WADA accept the final version of the legislation? And the reason I ask that question is because the minister has obviously been unable to tell us exactly how many drafts were submitted, which, given his explanation, certainly sounds a bit understandable. But I would like to know when WADA actually accepted the final version of the legislation, particularly given all of the back and forward that the minister has indicated that is going on. So those are my three questions. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Tucker.
Thank you, Madam President. And while you would know that I love to get extremely political in this chamber, this is a topic that I will stay away from, making this political. And I'm disappointed that Senator Tucker is getting very close to that line as to turning this into a political matter and almost taking shots at public officers and who's in administration.
Madam President, if I may, point of order, please. Because the minister is impeding improper motive. That is not what I'm doing. I did clearly indicate that my concern is around Bermuda being how we appear to the world, being on a watch list in the anti-doping arena. So I would appreciate if the minister would apologize because that is impeding improper motive. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Tucker, you've posed three questions, and the minister can either respond to the questions or not. It's entirely up to him. So we will not have this back and forth. Minister, you can respond.
Thank you, Madam President. And we are about 5 minutes away from passing this legislation, which will put Bermuda athletes and reiterate to the world that Bermuda athletes are indeed clean athletes and that Bermuda, under much advisement from the World Anti-Doping Organization, can do what's needed for their athletes. And I'm going to stay on that wicket, Madam President. I will answer the questions as posed. But this is a good day for athletes in Bermuda. Two athletes I did see yesterday evening. I did go down to the airport and welcome Connor White back. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say that we seem very, very concerned about athletes in this house, especially when it comes to this bill. But not one was at the airport with me when they returned. Not one, Madam President. But I'll move on to these questions. We were first notified of these the pending changes, as the statement said, in 2022. You would know that I went to a WADA meeting in January of 2023. Bermuda asked WADA for an extension in June of 2023. WADA did not give a date for the extension, and WADA accepted the final version of our legislation on the 5th of October. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Minister. And there are no other questions or concerns from the senators. You can move your bill.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move that the bill entitled the Anti-Doping in Sport Act 2023 be now read a second time.
Is there any objection to the second reading? No objection.
Madam President, I move that Rule 26 be suspended in respect of this bill.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection.
Madam President, I now move that the bill entitled Anti-Doping in Sport Act 2023 be now read a third time.
Is there any objection to the third reading? No objection.
Madam President, I move that the bill do now pass.
It has been moved that the bill entitled the Anti-Doping in Sport Act 2023 do now pass. Is there any objection to that motion? No objection. The bill is passed. Thank you,